Hello Year 12, welcome back. Hope you had a nice half term, relaxing in the sun. I certainly did. But now, obviously you'll be getting this on Friday, and you should have hopefully sent your task 9 to me already, the application task. I've had a few of those already, looking good. If you're looking at this on Friday, that is due by the end of today. And then we do need to move on to research methods. That's going to be it for the rest of the school year. Absolutely crucial topic. So why is it so crucial? Really important that you get this message. As you can see here from the spec, 25 to 30% of your overall mark from research methods. Okay, so say attachment or social influence, that'd be one of those topics would be about 8%, I think. So this obliterates everything. It's crucial. It's half of paper 2, but it comes up everywhere. Paper 1, paper 3, loads of research methods. So it is important. That's why we've been doing it. Sort of a drip, drip, drip throughout the whole course was the plan, but there was going to be the sort of big push as well this year to go over it, and I don't want to lose that. It's really important. So this term and anything I set for the summer will be research methods based. It's got to be secure. So how are we going to go about doing this? Well, it's pretty much back to where we were. I'll create a basic PowerPoint. I'll bore you senseless talking over it. But the key addition this time is I've bought digital version of the Tutor2U topic companion that you should be able to access along with the other stuff on this email. And the task will come from that book. So a couple of key things. First of all, it is about 90 pages. I'm not saying you all need to print out 90 pages. I don't want parental complaints or anything like that. If you want to, that's on you. If you want to look at it and print out certain bits, then fine, but you shouldn't have to. The questions will come from that book, but I will transfer that to a Word document that you'll complete and return to me each week. Now this is important. We've got a license, a school license, to share this electronically within the school, hence why it's attached to this email, but it can't go outside the school, so don't go sharing this around, plonking it on some website that everybody can access or anything like that. It's only for our use. So we're going to start with what I'd say is the most important bit really, experiments. You've got to know your language of experiments, what they are, what they aren't, and all the different types and designs and things like that as well, which, as I've said, we've talked about quite a bit already. So hopefully a lot of this will be revision rather than something new. So yeah, people do use the word experiment quite loosely, generally, but also sometimes within psychology, which is good. It's a very specific thing, looks at the effects of an independent variable, IV, on a dependent variable, DV, with a view to establishing cause and effect. So as we'll see, if you can control everything else and keep everything else constant, and the only thing changing is your independent variable, if your dependent variable, what you're measuring changes, you can say that that was caused by the independent variable. So that's why we like experiments, that's why we do them. If you're ever writing and you think, ooh, is that an experiment? I'm not sure. Call it study. Okay, so a study was conducted, and that's fine. Whereas if you misuse the word experiment, then you'll get in trouble. Okay, so that's just a little exam tip there. So you need to know 4 types: lab, field, natural, quasi. You need to know what they involve. You need to be able to describe them, the key features. You need to be able to see the difference between them. You need to be able to look at a scenario, an outline, and say, oh yeah, that's a field experiment. And you do need to know the pros and cons of each one as well. You're never going to do hugely extended writing in research methods, but at the bare minimum, you need to have a good strength and limitation of everything that we talk about. So lab experiments, probably what we look at the most in psychology. Tightly controlled conditions, participants come along to the lab to take part in the study, and you're directly manipulating the independent variable. You're changing those, the 2 or more conditions, okay? That's a crucial term, direct manipulation of the independent variable. Everything else should be tightly controlled, kept constant between conditions, to reduce the risk of extraneous variables, anything else that could influence the outcome in ways that shouldn't be. Independent variable should be the only thing that's different between your conditions, but if something else creeps in, time of day or something like that, then that's an extraneous variable that undermines what you're doing. Participants will know, I'd have thought most of the time that they're taking part in a study, they'll have come along to take part in it. That of course has implications later on. So yeah, the main strength of a lab experiment is these tightly controlled conditions, reducing the risk of extraneous variables, which therefore allows you to infer cause and effect. As I said earlier, if everything else is constant between your two conditions, you only change one thing, and that thing is the independent variable. If your dependent variable, your measure changes, you can say that was caused by the independent variable. Okay, so that's the benefits of lab experiments. As you'll see for the other ones, we can't quite get to that point with anywhere near as much confidence, so that's why they're used. However, as I'm sure you've written about many times already, they can lack external validity. One type of that is ecological validity, the extent to which you can generalize from the lab setting to other situations. You can end up with something quite artificial in the lab, which leads us saying, well, okay, fair enough, that's what happened then, but would that happen in a real life situation? We've got the other term, mundane realism here, mundane everyday. Are they doing things that aren't everyday tasks? The obvious example was Milgram's research with all of this. Yes, that's what happens when you're giving some learner in the other room shocks for getting a word thing wrong. I'm hoping that's not what occurs in everyday life for you. So you could argue it lacks ecological validity, lacks mundane realism. Don't be too definite with your wording. Far too often I see it was a lab experiment, therefore it had a high level of control but had low ecological validity. It could completely reflect a natural setting. The task could be a mundane task that everybody carries out on a regular basis. So think about what you're writing. Think about the actual study. Can you say with certainty why it doesn't reflect everyday life? Obedience, everyday obedience is a police officer telling you what to do, or a teacher ignoring them. That's everyday obedience. That's not really what we're seeing there. Okay, so just make sure that you justify the comment. You can't just scatter that around and say that it applies to all lab studies. A lab study could have really naff controls. It's unlikely, but it could. There is also, as I said earlier, people know they're taking part, so you have got the risk of demand characteristics. You want people to be acting naturally. If they're not, if they're doing what they feel they should be doing, then that's a problem. That again undermines what you're doing. Are you measuring what you think you're measuring? Will do validity in its own right further down the line. That's ultimately what validity is. Are you measuring what you claim to be measuring? And if you're measuring what people think they should be doing in this particular situation, then that's not natural behaviour. So moving on to a field experiment. So in a natural setting, participants are usually not aware that they're taking part, but you are still, and this is a crucial thing, that's why I put it in bold, you still are manipulating the independent variable. So yes, you've stepped outside the lab. Yes, you could be in the high street or something like that, carrying out your study, but you're still manipulating the IV. You're still controlling those conditions. My usual example is you could have a Confederate carrying bags of shopping fall over. You could have a male falling over in one condition, a female in another. You could be measuring response times or something like that. That would be a field experiment. In a natural setting, at the time of responding to the person, people wouldn't know that they're taking part in the study at all. So hopefully you're getting that natural behaviour. But yeah, you're still directly controlling the conditions. You're controlling if it's the male or the female falling over. So what's the strength and limitation of a lab experiment is sort of switched for this. So yes, your ecological validity, your external validity is increasing here. It's a more natural setting. People aren't aware that they're taking part, should reduce need demand characteristics, and all of those things that we talked about for lab experiments. But all the time, we're losing the control. Okay, so we've got other factors creeping in that could affect that behaviour. So in my example, people responded more quickly when a female fell over, perhaps, or maybe, but then it may be that it looked like it was about to chuck it down with rain when we did the male condition. That would be a whole nother factor. The time of day, it might be that you did it at lunchtime for one condition where people were rushing a bit more and so were less likely to help. You're saying, oh yeah, it's down to the gender of the person, but actually it might not be. It could be the time of day, it could be the weather and things like that. Okay, so that's the trade-off that you have to think about. Natural experiment. Now on this one, you're not directly manipulating the independent variable. The IV is what's natural. It's naturally occurring. You've got these different groups, these different conditions anyway. So whenever you're looking at a study, is it happening anyway? Then you're looking at a natural experiment. In a lab experiment, in a field experiment, you've created it, you've made it happen, you've created those conditions. Hodges and Tizard, I forget now if this comes up in attachment or maybe something in the second year, but they looked at different groups. It's all to do with the effect of institutionalization on development, and they had groups who had been adopted, fostered, returned to their mothers, or a control group who had always been in the biological family. So you've got different conditions, but for obvious reasons it wasn't allocation to those conditions. It happened anyway, and so therefore you can measure those differences. So yes, you've got your conditions of the independent variable, but they were naturally occurring. They were there anyway, and then you're measuring the outcome. So sometimes this is useful when it isn't ethical to allocate to conditions. Pros and cons. Yep, when it comes to ecological validity, this is naturally occurring. There's no manipulation at all, so that's really increasing your ecological validity. It's naturally occurring conditions with no interference at all. But as that's increasing, as we talk through these, the control is going the other direction. Now you've got no control over environment and extraneous variables. So really, you're very limited when it comes to trying to make cause and effect statements here, because it could well be one of many other factors that have influenced the dependent variable beyond the single factor, the IV, that you're looking at. So again, it's a trade-off to be made there. And then the last one, quasi-experiment. I haven't seen this come up too much, but I'll certainly make sure you have a definition to hand. This is where the IV already exists in the person. Okay, so the usual examples are age or gender in studies. So it should be obvious when you read a STEM on a question. It should be obvious if people have been allocated due to some pre-existing factor, then that would be a quasi-experiment. Now these cross over with the other types we've seen. It could be conducted in a lab setting. Could be gender differences in something, but then again it could be a natural experiment. So yeah, again, if it would be unethical to manipulate the independent variable, if it's occurring anyway, then that can be useful. However, you don't really, in an experiment, you want random allocation, randomly allocating people to conditions. That's not the case here. People are in those conditions because of these pre-existing factors. That could introduce some bias. It could mean that any changes on the DV are due to factors beyond the independent variable. Also, as I've said, these can take place in different settings, and they come therefore with the pros and cons. If it's in a lab setting, you've got the control, the ecological validity, and so on. Okay, so yeah, I haven't seen many questions where quasi-experiments come up, but don't ignore it. Do watch out. This was new on the current specification, so some revision sites don't include this. It is on the spec, so make sure you've got that definition, and just make sure in your mind you're thinking, are these people in these conditions because of something that's already naturally occurring? Okay, so that's what I want to cover for the first topic. So what do you need to do now? Read through pages 3 to 5 of the topic companion. You'll probably want to get stuck straight into the questions, but I would recommend other reading as well. So I'd say page 172 to 173 of the digital textbook, that definitely focuses on types of experiment. There are things that have cropped up that are on different pages, so you could have a flick around and look through those as well. But things like validity, if you're thinking, still not quite sure about that, we are doing that in its own right again further down the line. So once you've done that, you then need to complete questions 1 to 11, not question 12, I don't think we need that. So questions 1 to 11, adding your answers to the Word document that I've provided, but you will need to be cross-referencing with the digital companion, not digital companion, the topic companion, because that gives you the STEM and that's needed. It also has some quite detailed prompts, sometimes to the point where it's almost giving you the answer. That's fine. So you will need to read those, because on the Word document you've only got the bare bones question. So you need to be looking at the topic companion and then writing your answer on the Word document. And this is to be ready for Friday the 12th of June. As always, any questions, do let me know. Okay, good luck with that. I'll leave it there. Thank you.